topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I'm a core alignment coach and emotional wisdom training specialist and a longtime diversity educator. And tonight's show is called A Call to Duty and Caring for Veterans. I want to just mention one thing to let people know that if you're interested in looking at my website, it's knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com, and you'll see examples of coaching or trainings I offer to people, often related to recognizing patterns of biases and learning how to step out of them and create new patterns that are much more inclusive and actually make everyone much happier when everyone knows that they belong. So that's knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com. So today, my guests are very special to me. This topic is very meaningful to me. If you've been following me weekly, we actually replayed the show that had our two returning guests today, and yet we're doing another one now, again, because it's so important to care for our veterans and to increase the awareness and of the sacrifices people make when they join military services to help protect our lives and our country. And if again, I know some people have seen our special on to care for veterans the last 2 years, and we do always begin by dedicating it to Robert Kassem, I call him my cousin Bobby, who served in Vietnam for 18 months. He flew helicopters, and I believe it was a UH-1, and he had an extremely dangerous and difficult job of extracting and transporting Vietnamese and US troops out of hot landing zones during Vietnam. And he was outstandingly courageous and also very, very loving. He was a deeply loving, caring human being. And we were absolutely devastated. He made it home alive, but he was not able to cope with the post-service life. Not enough support at the time. So Bobby took his own life by his own hands after returning home to this country. And we know that sadly, he's not alone. The numbers of veterans who have committed suicide or who are unhoused is tragic. So I want to add two other voices here now because they're the experts. So I'll just read a little bit. There's so much more I can say about each of them, but I'll start by mentioning Richard K. Kassem II, who's a retired lieutenant colonel, U.S. Army, and he is currently an instructor, a senior Army instructor at Shikellamy School District. And we actually have photos we can show later on today where he can describe some of how he teaches young people to prepare to do service. And our other guest is Mona Pearl Trayball, who has a vast experience in many different roles in the military. And she is a retired U.S. Air Force, a PhD in public policy, professor and specialty director of veteran military healthcare programs at University of Colorado and Schultz Medical Center, and so much more. Please join me. I'm so grateful to have you both here, and I always learn from you. And John, yay, John Kraft. Because of a technical problem, I wasn't sure John would be here. So let me introduce John. I'm so glad you made it.
Glad to be here.
John Kraft, retired U.S. Air Force pilot, an officer and a leader. And you will each have the opportunity to please add anything you want to know. But I'll just let the listeners and viewers know that I've asked you all to share parts of your personal stories of service. It really helps us to hear what you did, what it was like for you, whatever you want to share. And then we were going to turn the discussion towards post-service life and pay attention to the care that veterans need. And I know that Mona in particular has developed a curriculum that she can talk about a program, and also wanted to make sure we highlight the impact of the PACT Act, the Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics Act, signed by President Biden in August 2022. So welcome, all three of you. My favorite part is when I turn it over to y'all. So I want to start with Richard, because he is related to Bobby, who we dedicate this show to. So Richard, I just wanted to give you the opportunity, because you're Bobby's nephew, if you wanted to add anything to this dedication to him.
Well, let me start by thanking you Bahia for inviting me back. I've enjoyed speaking on your podcast for the last 2 years, and I'm honored to be back. It's good to see Mona again, and Buzz, it's nice to meet you. So you did a fine job of introducing Uncle Bobby. He did serve with valor in Vietnam as part of an air assault unit. He earned the Distinguished Flying Cross with a V device, and the V, of course, stands for valor. So he was a true hero, and he returned from combat back to the United States. He and my father both. My father was married and had children, and or one child anyway, me. And so he had kind of a support group to fall back on. But Uncle Bobby was single and was not greeted kindly when he came back to the United States, and had no support group, no support to fall back on. And consequently, he fell victim to suicide. So we miss him. I know if my father is listening to this podcast, I know he misses his brother very much. And we hope that as a consequence of having this discussion, we might be able to reach out to people who need support, or inform people of ways that they can provide that support to other veterans.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your adding the Medals of Valor he won as well. And Mona, can you please let folks know about the program? I know that's and then we'll say hello to John, or we can call him Buzz, before we go into everyone's pieces of stories.
Well, I thank you also, Bahia, for having us here, and I am very committed to caring for our veterans. As a nurse in the military, as a nurse even before the military, I think we have the opportunity to reach out and help take care of those who serve. And they certainly did serve it, like your uncle, and they suffer. They go through a lot, they sacrifice, they put their lives on the line. And then they often come home to a country that doesn't understand them, or people that don't know how to support them or understand the experience that they've been through. So hearing their stories, sometimes they hear it through us or through us that have survived. But listening to their stories is really important. And if you know anyone that is contemplating suicide or is coping with that psychic pain of feeling so helpless and hopeless, we do have a new 988 number nationally for suicide help. So I think it's really important to mention that. because it's 1988 and you can get to someone who can help support you in that moment. So I would have to say that very first off is important. I did, after a lifetime of service, it seems like, or a whole part of service, was able to develop a curriculum. And that comes from having been in the military everywhere from the battlefield to the Pentagon, and writing policy and seeing the entire enterprise. Having been married to someone who was in the service, kicking down the doors in Fallujah, deploying like 25 times, coming back with PTSD, and then walking away from the family and understanding the whole family perspective. And then myself having three cancers while in the military serving, and having that patient perspective of being in the bed to deal with the consequences of other effects, maybe from toxic exposures, and what that was like, really led me to saying we could do better in taking care of our veterans. And so we have a Master's of Science now in Veteran and Military Healthcare, a Doctor of Nursing Practice in Veteran and Military Healthcare, and a graduate certificate that's open to everyone, whether or not they're a nurse, that they could take this graduate education and really learn to help care for this population. It's really very deep. Right now, it's touched more than 1 million veterans through the nurses who's been in the curriculum. So thank you so much, Bahia, for having us and promoting and the care of our veterans nationwide.
Thank you so much. And I know Rebel can make a banner of that hotline number, so that can be streaming for anyone who's able to see this with the camera. Some people will be listening on the podcast. So it's 1988 for, is that correct? I think Mona's going to type it in the chat. Thank you. And John, I didn't mention, or Lieutenant Colonel Buzz, Lieutenant Colonel Buzzcraft, that you worked for the California Department of for Veterans Affairs.
Right, CalVet, the California Department of Veterans Affairs, yeah, for a number of years.
And you begin by starting with your service and what you did, like what you want to share with us about your story of service.
Well, sure. Thanks, Bahia. Thanks for having me, and really appreciate the chance to online meet Mona and Rich as well. And I know that we are here, banded together with the same goal, with the same purpose in mind, and that's to make sure that every veteran, everyone who's served, or any family member or friend that's around that veteran knows how important it is to get them hooked up with the benefits that they might need. And in many cases, veterans just either they don't know about benefits, or they just feel like they don't want to engage with that level of help or care, which is problematic, right? So backing up to what you're asking for as an intro, Bahia, I served in the U.S. Air Force, and I was a pilot, and was in several different combat efforts, starting with a very brief one, fortunately, in Panama, and then when I thought, well, okay, that's my taste of what a very light taste of what maybe war is like, through the eyes of many others, who were serving there. I thought that maybe that would be it, and how fortunate is that? But then just a few years later, then we entered Desert Storm, and then I was a participant service member in that, in the strategic airlift world, flying out of Travis Air Force Base, where I'm about 20 miles from there now, in Northern California, flying troops and equipment out into the European theater and then down into the Middle East. And then I thought, okay, this has been a very interesting experience, not as brief as the Panama combat experience, but nevertheless, just got the objectives met, and were able to move on to other peaceful things. And I thought, okay, great, that's it. I'm really seeing enough of that, so we're done with that. And then, of course, Afghanistan and Iraq, theaters of operations entered, and I was involved primarily in the Afghanistan theater. I was stationed in the ground starting in 2002 as an air coordination cell planner and director. Um, and it was very surreal. I was there for the first anniversary of 9/11, living in a tent,
Wow.
and had the finest teammates around, and everybody had an understanding of what was important to do for our nation's defense, but also to try to help the people uh, right there that were native to that land. And I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to discuss that later. But overall, it was a very eye-opening experience, obviously, and I think it's primarily because of that experience that I realized, veterans serve in many different ways, and quite fortunately, a lot of veterans don't end up having to serve in some kind of combat role. But nevertheless, they served and they agreed to give their all, literally to sacrifice, put everything on the line. And that's enough. Our whole country should embrace every veteran because of that. Um, Again, unfortunately, because of some that were put in harm's way and had to endure various unfortunate effects of war. We have an obligation, nevertheless, to help them out, and that's where it comes full circle to what I was just talking about when I was more recently working with Calvet, where we are the state of California's agency to help connect veterans to their benefits, and it's to this day, even though I've left that job, retired from that work, although I never really retire from it. That's why I'm here tonight. Uh, it is amazing how many service members gave their all, were willing to sacrifice everything, and they come back and say, I'm just done, and I don't necessarily need anything, or I don't think I need anything, and they don't want to burden those around them to accept benefits even. So that's problematic, and and I think that's where we are today with, how do we deliver benefits? First, we have to make veterans aware of them. And then we have to help veterans understand that, it's just important for society at large. And it really helps your fellow former battle buddies to be able to engage with and accept the notion that, hey, it's okay to have a little help. And in doing so, you are setting an example for others that perhaps need even greater levels of help and care. So, and that's it's something that it was very much post-military service that I recognized was super important. So I'm really, really thankful that you're having a show like this tonight with these guests, and we can kind of have discussion like that. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. We'll come back to you because I know you have organized some teams and different ways to engage veterans that I'm sure are good models for other people. Actually, what you could just comment on that now, if you would. Like, what are some examples of that?
Sure. I have been very fortunate to work with a lot of veterans organizations across full facets of just adult life. When you leave high school, you go on to either a job or you go on to higher education. And in both of those worlds, there are, first of all, places that are interested in hiring veterans, and that's very important. And then there are places that are interested in assisting veterans with some, gap filling for what they need. So I've been able to work with Habitat for Humanity that has been veteran specific, and even as a specificity to that, I've been in Southern California active in a housing project targeted for women veterans. Doesn't mean they're not going to let male veterans in, but it was really enriching to see that women veterans were taking the lead to creating entire neighborhoods, entire communities to help veterans that, again, as I mentioned before, are not necessarily looking for. They're not kind of screaming for help, and sometimes it takes it takes that mixture of everybody in the community to help make that a reality. Um, More on the grassroots level, and I have a wonderful chance to work with youth coming out of high school that are interested in either enlisting in the military, and I work as a liaison with recruiters in a very informal way in that endeavor, and then also as a liaison officer to service academies and ROTC programs to help find if these young people that are about to graduate high school are interested in, and the military is looking for that sort of commitment to continue to serve, because serving in the military is not going away. When we look at helping veterans and we look at the difficulties and challenges of war and the injuries endured in combat, both physical and unseen, I think it's also very important to remember that the importance of serving is not going away just because we say these people have endured physical or behavioral health wrongs. It doesn't mean that the causation of that needs to be thrown away, because I very strongly believe that it's important to maintain a strong defense posture. And of course, I hope with all my heart that our civilian leadership in the legislature and the executive branch know how to most wisely use our military for the greater good. And I think that's been borne out historically with our nation. But I don't want to just kind of throw it all away and say, well, we should just stop finding people who are willing to serve so that they don't have to endure these injuries that veterans receive. I think we just need to focus on making sure we have a very strong force in defense of our nation, but at the same time, and just as importantly, how are we going to help them, to help guarantee that they are cared for. And that absolutely goes back to recruiting them, right? Because if you're looking at being a recruited member of the military and you see that veterans aren't cared for, well, odds are you're not going to get a lot of people wanting to sign up anymore. So it's an absolute full circle effort.
And I could just add to that, because I think you're right on about that. And the thing that we are, United States of America, that we come together is in national defense. And that is something that we all need to have as a country. So we absolutely need a strong defense force. We need a strong military, and we need then to take care of those people that are going to lay down their life for the person next to them. And there is no other kind of job per se that asks that of the people that come and volunteer to give themselves. And they will give everything for that person next to them, for their country, for the ideals of this nation. And that's something very special that our service members are. They're very altruistic in that way, and that people don't always appreciate or recognize. And it's not easy to be in the military. You're on call 24/7, 365 for as long as you're in, every moment of the day. And you could be called back. And as officers, we can also always be called back, no matter what. We are part of the nation's role of who's raised their hand and said, yes, I will go and defend, and I will be here for you. And we owe them to take care of them, because it's a tough job. It's physiologically demanding. It's psychologically demanding. And when you're in a profession of arms where you're giving all of your time and putting the mission first, then we as a nation have an obligation to take care of you. And I think that's why the PACT Act is so historic, because it's finally saying anybody who encountered any of these conditions or were in this area of operations, we're not going to make you prove that you have that condition, that it's related to military service. We are going to presume it's service connected. And that's why it's so important for people to get screened at the VA. Since that act was passed in August of 2022, they screened almost 5 million people, 5 million of our veterans. And it's really important to have that screening on multiple levels. Yes, for the individual, they can get access to care and benefits and compensation, but then it also assures that that level of care will be there for their brothers and sisters that also served in arms. Because if we don't sign up and get screened as veterans, then that VA may go away. They have to know the care that it is being provided to everybody out there. So you can continue to give back in that way, even if you don't feel like you need that level of care. It's really important to go through the screening process and sign up, even if you don't want to take the services right now.
Thank you so much, Mona. I know there's more to say about that, but I just want to, for radio listeners who cannot see the banner, I just want to say out loud the number that you brought to our attention for if you're a veteran in crisis or concerned about someone, you can dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and press 1 for veteran care. So I might say that a couple more times before we have to wrap up, but we got over 20 minutes. And I'm just wondering right now, if does this feel like a good time for Rich to talk about, since he's a senior instructor now, a junior ROTC, he sent some pictures, and it might be a good time to share. I asked him, what is that training like, and how are your cadets right now feeling about being trained? I just imagine at different times, depending on what's happening in the world, it might be a little more nerve-wracking than not when you're in training and preparing and signing up, and haven't been there yet. So Rich kindly sent, I think we have like 7 or 8 photographs, and Rebel says she has them. So Rich, can you just describe the photos as they up, and then ask her for when you're ready for the next photo?
Certainly. So we every summer we have a program for the cadets who finished their first year of JROTC. It's called JROTC Cadet Leadership Training, or CTLT, and or JCLC, I guess is the acronym, JCLC. And so this is a photograph of the cadets. We part of one of the training events we do out there is called DASH training. And here we have taken a road march out to the side of a mountain in Pennsylvania, in Boswell, Pennsylvania. And that lump you see in the center of the screen is the engine of an aircraft that was bringing 2 World War II veterans home. They had made it all the way back to the United States, were flying on their home stretch home. And in the fog, the plane crashed in the mountain. And there's a monument there to them, and it lists their dates of birth and their dates of death. And those 2 dates are separated by a dash or a hyphen. And the idea of this training is to impress upon the cadets that the historic date of your birth and your death, or even the circumstances of your death, are not as important as that dash between the time you're born and the time you die. What do you do with that time to leave a legacy behind after you're gone? So this is a photograph of the DASH training. So if you'd like to move to the next photograph, I can. All right, so this is the gauntlet. It's just one of the obstacle courses that the cadets go through as part of the physical training that we do out there, and endurance. Many of the cadets have never had an opportunity to experience some of these adventure type activities, and they just don't realize, many of them, what they're capable of doing. And so this is a course that involves maneuvering under and over obstacles in a river. So the cadets get wet and they have a good time and develop their physical fitness in the process. So yep, there's another obstacle in the gauntlet, and you got to go over the log. So there's a cadet preparing to vault the log. Okay, and then here we have another cadet in the woods. So we don't teach tactics in JROTC. We teach leadership and civics, and part of that is just physical fitness and getting outside and experiencing some of the thrill of what it's like to to be outside in the Army in your camouflage uniform. So many of them have never walked through the woods before. So this is just an experience to build their confidence. And then, of course, on the flip side, we have formal. We teach etiquette and formal aspects of the military. So this is our dining in. Every year we have a dining in and a dining out. The dining in is just the cadets, no outside visitors, and it's more of a fun activity. They put on skits and make fun of each other. And this is our dining in. We have a dining out in the second semester, which is a more formal ball. And so here there. This is the Grog Bowl. Many military people are going to be familiar with the Grog Bowl. Of course, ours has no alcohol in it, but it does have a lot of disgusting things in it. And the cadets love it. They find ways to get sent to the Grog Bowl and take pride in how many times they get sent to the Grog Bowl as a punishment for some offense of etiquette. Yeah, there's another photograph of the dining in. Yeah. So those are just a few of the things we do. We do lots of service projects. We have those formal events, the dining in and the dining out. We do field training exercises, field trips. So in addition to the curriculum that we teach, and the cadets wear uniforms and get inspected in their uniforms, and we do physical training and they get a leadership assessment. So again, we don't teach any tactics, but we do try to teach them the fundamental American values of physical fitness and leadership and civics, and that are values that we would like to see in military soldiers and military officers. So even very few of them go on to enlist in the Army or the military, or to go to ROTC or an academy. But hopefully they all graduate from the program with some of the characteristics that we would like to see in those kinds of people. So.
Thank you so much. I also, can you share about the diplomatic end of your service? I didn't mention the work that you did.
Certainly. I started my career as an infantry officer. In fact, I am still an infantry officer. I still wear my infantry brass on my dress uniform. But after I was promoted to major, I transitioned to my functional area in the Army, which was foreign area officer. My area of concentration was the Middle East and North Africa. So I went to the Defense Language Institute to learn Arabic. And then immediately from there, I was deployed to Iraq as a FAO for a brigade in combat. And my function there was to serve as a linguistic and cultural advisor to the brigade commander and help him understand what was going on. I did some level of interpreting conversations and reading graffiti and things like that, but mostly I helped to prepare him for engagements on a cultural level. What's appropriate to do, what's appropriate to talk about, kind of reading the room, that sort of thing. And from that point on, for the last 15 years of my military career, I was mostly served and lived in the Middle East, with a few staff assignments interspersed at United States Central Command, culminating in my last assignment, which was on the Joint Staff in Arlington, Virginia, at the Pentagon. So that was the brunt of the second half of my military career was spent in the Middle East, in many different places: Cairo, Jerusalem, Mosul, Iraq, Baghdad, Iraq, and in several, Amman, Jordan, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Wow. Wow. Covered a lot of territory.
It was a culturally enriching experience, and I loved every minute of it. I miss it, but I love what I'm doing now. So, I miss parts of it, but I'm very happy with where I am now. I'm it's young people's business. I'm too old for that now. So now I have an
No.
office job.
One thing you said last year related to reading the room, like I asked you if you were like a official translator, and you said actually I was more like kind of reading the subtext, so to speak.
Yes,
Um,
that's correct. All official business I conducted in English because there's just too much room for error trying to conduct official business in a foreign language.
mhm.
But on a cultural level, trying to make friends and get along with people, and then I would speak to them in Arabic, and I would try to listen in on conversations. Of course, the challenge with Arabic is that the dialects are so vastly different from each other. They're almost like different languages. The difference between maybe French and English, where a lot of the nouns resemble each other, but the verbs are conjugated differently. The words who, what, where, why, and when are all different. It's difficult when you're in a place for 18 months or maybe 2 years to really get fluent in any particular dialect. So if I did have to speak in Arabic on an official capacity, I would speak a modern standard Arabic, which is not very conversational. It's a very formal version of Arabic. But yes, I did spend a lot of time conversing with people and reading the room. I was not a translator or an interpreter, but I did use the language extensively.
Yeah, sounds like you had to. The tiny bit I can relate to is when I was served in the Peace Corps in Nepal for 3 years.
Mhm.
That every 6 months or so, I'd go, "Oh, now I understand what that means," and 6 more months, like, "Oh, now I understand what that means." The layers of the subtlety of comprehension in another language seem endless, especially when you have different dialects.
This conversation part reminds me of all the different international engagements that we have, and it's not always conflict. A lot of times we have a lot of partnerships and we go to war as multi-nations, with multinational partners or as NATO. And we get to really learn to also be interoperable with the different countries or build, like in my case in medical, we built regional medical networks so that the regions could help network themselves to take care of any disasters or humanitarian response or traumatic injuries. So like I had 3 different times where we did international medical education in Tunisia and built a regional network also with Algeria and Morocco so that as neighbors they could develop. And I think the work that we do also in the military helps developing nations because any country puts its logistics in its military. So if the government wants to express itself, it has to send the military. So I know in my doctoral work, I looked at expeditionary medical diplomacy and how medics can build bridges between countries because we're taking care of people and opening up the hearts and minds when you're actually touching and taking care of them. So there's all these other aspects and ways in which the military engages and that helps to promote peace and new country development around the world. And people don't always see those missions or know about those missions other than war that go on in the service. And of course, then we have the conflict and war operations as well, which is the main purpose of being able to keep us safe.
Thank you for bringing in that aspect. Yeah, that is not focused on, probably not well known, and enormously important.
And I think the other thing that people sometimes don't see is how many times the military has been helpful in liberating other peoples around the world, like in World War II and during the Holocaust and opening up the concentration camps. My mom was a Holocaust survivor and I've had family that were there. So I'm very connected to the ways in which we have supported other countries. And I know of frontline special forces that have gone forward in the early days in Iraq and found all the torture chambers and things that were underground and the people that were just buried alive and liberating them. So, I mean, there's all different elements on a humanitarian level that sometimes we are not always aware of.
Thank you. John, I saw you nodding your head a lot. Did something in particular come up?
Yes, thank you for noticing, Bahia. I really appreciate Colonel Treball's insight into the fact that, and it goes back to something that you had mentioned, coordinating our presence tonight. You know, what are the alternatives to war or to serving in war? Well, they're very clearly the ones that Colonel Treball just mentioned, and even more. It's the idea that if we as service members can carry out the intentions of our elected leaders, who are sworn just as we are to operate in concert with our Constitution, then we are bound to rules that govern how we act and interact in civilized society. And if we meet factions that are not civilized, we do our best to defend ourselves and those sovereign nations that we've aligned with. But perhaps more importantly, we can kind of back that train up and get to the heart of the hearts and minds of people, as Colonel Treball just said. When I was serving in Afghanistan, I was in a big tent complex working on airlift and airstrike plans to affect some sort of, greater good in the region. But my side gig was what was really paying off, which was I would go out with other organizations, and they were indeed multinational, outside of our base, and we were conducting civil support missions where we were immunizing families, children, building and rebuilding schools, supporting digging new wells, that sort of thing. Things that I never dreamed I would do as a pilot in the Air Force. It's like, what am I doing here? It turned out to be the most important, probably the most important work that I ever did in the military. Other than being a parent, maybe the most important work as an adult. So, and although I know that geopolitics has taken a turn in a different direction in that region, there is still some sort of a little foothold that we were able to create, and that is why many of us serve. And I think that the alternative to war is what we focus on. I don't know anybody I don't know anybody personally who wants to go to war and who wants to engage in combat. That's incredibly risky, and you could literally give everything up by doing that. But what's important is that you're willing to do that in the hopes that you can create a defense posture. And I think you can rattle a saber. You could argue whether that's fortunate or unfortunate way of doing business, but you can also do that other much more positive, proactive pull that Colonel Treball mentioned of going in and helping and indicating that there is a better future for you that you can make happen, and wouldn't it be nice if we could help you with that? And I think that's how you make peace. You plant the right seeds. And I truly believe that our military is still very focused on that. Unfortunately, our news media doesn't always focus on what we're really focused on, right? So it's to this day, it's the most important thing is to present a strong enough force that has look at our national symbol that you see on the presidential seal, you see on Colonel Trebol's rank insignia. Indeed, it's an eagle, and the eagle's beak is pointed toward an olive branch, and the beak is pointed away from the other talon that's clutching arrows. And so it's very important to be able to legitimately show that we have the wherewithal, the power to do both, but that we are very much hoping for and working towards that olive branch.
Thank you so much. Both of you, I realize we have about 4 minutes left, so I want to make sure y'all can add any kind of closing thought. And again, I just want to read what Mona shared. I'm going to read this. If you're a veteran in crisis or concerned about one, connect with our caring qualified responders for confidential help. Call 988 and select 1. Text 838-255. And I want, Rich, did you feel like what was being asked of you when you were working in all those different countries was to just help cultivate peace as well?
Well, yes. I mean, that was one of my functions as a military diplomat was to maintaining a stable peace is as demanding as maintaining a stable war. So it's not easy. It's hard to maintain a stable peace. And for over 99% of Americans don't even calculate the idea of finding themselves in a war into their mental calculations. But for the less than 1% who volunteer for military service, if you find that you need information about the PACT Act or about any other help you might need, a good place to start is to visit your local VFW post or American Legion and ask to speak to the service officer, and they will point you in the right direction. So please seek the help and get screened and continue to serve in that way.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
can
much.
I add something really quick based on you speaking with Richard? Rich, I just wanted to say directly, I am so glad that you are giving back in the way that you are now. I actually was an Air Force Junior ROTC cadet back in the ancient times before, cell phones, and I don't think we even had television. Well, maybe we had that, but that was absolutely the motivation for all of us to do well for our communities. And like you mentioned before, we're not all going into the military, but just being a teacher that you are now, full on is to me that's the most noblest of jobs, to help motivate and shape our youth, because they are our replacements. So my hat's off to you. I really appreciate what you're doing, and you're making a huge difference. And thank you.
Well, thank you. It's my privilege to be able to continue to serve in this way. So I love the job.
Mona, let's give you and thank you. Give you the last word, and then I'll thank everyone.
Capitalize on what my wondrous colleagues have said, and say that no one wants peace more than the soldier who's been to war. Any of us who've been there, we know it, we've seen it, and it's ugly going to war. But we do need to take care of our folks that go and support them. And I thank you for bringing them into your hearts and your homes and taking care of them, and all the great work that all three of you are doing to help make sure that they know they're part of our family. And we do want to create peace across this world. And I think that the ideals of America in terms of creating democratic societies is really part of why people do answer that call to serve, that we want to create a better civilization for all of us to live in peace. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you, retired Colonel Mona Pearl Trayvall, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Cassim, and Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Kraft. I'm so grateful to all three of you on so many levels, and I want to thank our engineer Rebel for being there for us, and our producer Dean Piper, and anyone listening to this. Please share. It's archived on YouTube, w4cy.com. It'll be on podcast platforms. And I will just close by saying, may we all have enriching conversations in diversity and peace. And we'll see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you again.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech